Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has defended his plan to expand the war in Gaza in the face of growing criticism at home and abroad.
Mr. Netanyahu said that he, quote, has no choice but to finish the job. Hamas criticized the Israeli leader's plans as an attempt at forced displacement. The Palestinian envoy to the UN accused Israel of preventing statehood of his people at an Emergency Security Council meeting.
Now, the U.S. defended Israel at the same meeting, while the UN official warned of a risk of another calamity if Mr. Netanyahu's plans are implemented. Now, for more, let's speak now with Gregory Treverton. He's a professor of the practice of international relations and spatial sciences at the University of Southern California. And Professor Treverton is joining us from Los Angeles this morning. Professor, let's start with Mr. Netanyahu's justification for this offensive. Now, he is calling this the best way to end the war and secure the release of Israeli hostages. But is that a possible outcome? And if not, are there better alternatives?
It does seem like it. We've had this conversation several times, right? He really had, as far as I can tell, no end game for the invasion. And it's always looked like the end game was going to be Israeli occupation of Gaza. And that's kind of where we are now. How that works out, whether it works out in any way, it seems like at the current circumstances, it produces almost no incentive for Hamas to agree to a deal. They'd like a deal and release some hostages, but they want a real ceasefire. And Netanyahu seems to have no interest in a ceasefire. And from a military standpoint, exactly what completing the job means has never been very clear. We knew that from the beginning that he could never eradicate Hamas, that every time he killed more Palestinians and more Gazans, he was producing more recruits to Hamas. He certainly diminished their power a lot. And I would think that even most Israelis, including all these former security and intelligence people who spoke last week, understand that the job is basically done. And now the task is to find some way to govern Gaza in a decent way without full-scale Israeli occupation. And we still don't see much sign of an alternative to that full-scale occupation.
You know, yesterday, as the Prime Minister was speaking at his press conference, I realized it's really very difficult to verify the examples that Netanyahu gave to defend Israel, because as journalists, you know, we know that there's no reporting allowed from Gaza itself. So by showing these pictures of the malnourished kid that was nursed back to health and all these multiple containers of aid, could he make his case strong and convincing enough to change the minds of traditional allies around the world, many of whom concurrently slammed him at the UN and in Europe?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And, you know, I hesitate to even entertain this hypothesis, but it looks more and more to me like it's possible that Netanyahu didn't mind this war, right? That there was a great intelligence failure, but maybe it wasn't a pure intelligence failure. Surely he didn't want the carnage that Hamas did on October 7. But it seemed to me the more this goes on, the more we have to entertain the hypothesis that both for his political reasons and to stay out of jail, he needed this war, and needed this war in part because he thought he could use it as an opportunity both to stay out of jail and to destroy Hamas. Not a hypothesis I like to entertain, but it seems to me more and more plausible given that how bad the intelligence failure in October 7th was. And we know that, you know, it's easy to say, oh, these were women, but Israel is probably less sexist than most places I know, including my own country. And so it does look more and more like the warning that was there was either disregarded or purposely ignored.
And Professor, and there's obviously the U.S. angle. I want to get your thoughts on Trump's tacit green light of Israel's Gaza plan. Is this a blank check? And given the growing gap with its key allies, is Washington at risk of compromising its authority or leadership on the global stage?
Well, I think that's right. You know, I think it is right. And, you know, it's Mr. Trump has been super supportive of Netanyahu from the beginning. That's his inclination. But in the face of all the rising concern from allies and friends, international public opinion, it's not a place that I would like my country to be, or I would like my president to be. He probably feels he has not much choice, but it does mean that, as many people observed, Netanyahu has played him over and over again since the beginning of his presidency.
Now, Professor, can Israel realistically retrieve the remaining 20 hostages back alive after this declaration of Mr. Netanyahu's?
I think not. No, I think that they're gone. It seems to me there's no reason for Hamas to release hostages short of something that Netanyahu's not willing to do. If there were a real ceasefire, maybe even a couple months ceasefire, maybe, but he doesn't seem disposed to do that, and my country is not putting pressure on him to do it. So I think that's the hostage game is essentially over, sadly, because it's the main thing that Hamas has going for it, and it's not going to yield that chip without getting something more significant from Israel than Netanyahu is prepared to offer.
Professor, another big question is the future governance of Gaza. I mean, Israel says it won't govern the territory directly, but it's also ruled out Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So who exactly does it expect to take control? And would any state agree to do so under current conditions?
Very good questions, I think. And I think the answer is probably not. You know, there have been reports throughout that Israel was thinking about some reformation of the Palestinian Authority, maybe some tutelage from Arab states, maybe including the United States. That's been talked about, but it seems very far from fruition now. And the longer this goes on, the harder, as we've seen, the Arab states are not at all willing to participate in this kind of thing unless they get something that really looks attractive to them. We know the Arab states have never really cared much about the Palestinians. They've sold them out over and over again. But still, even visually, cosmetically, they need much more than Netanyahu is prepared to offer if they're going to participate in any way in the future governance of Gaza. As I said, now it seems like the only alternative is Israeli occupation essentially forever. What that leads to, not nice to contemplate.
And Professor, talk to us about something that a lot of people picked up last night. Prime Minister Netanyahu's generous referencing of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism in his press conference, particularly when justifying why Germany's chancellor plans to stop weapon deliveries to Israel. He's opening up a lot of wounds there. Why go down this road at this juncture?
Yeah, for me, that's kind of befuddling, right? Since, after all, Germany has been among the most supportive countries in the world of Israel, and they've done reparations, they've done lots of things. So the idea to criticize them, that does seem to me, you know, it's as you know, the debate about anti-Semitism is very much alive in my own country, and in some sense, fairly so. But it's also been used as a weapon. Mr. Trump has used it certainly as a weapon against universities and other places. So it is. I hate seeing that particular card played in a kind of very partisan or very, very interested way. It surprised me, particularly given Germany's record, which has been quite wonderful in trying to atone and account for the Holocaust.
Great to hear your thoughts, and thank you so much for sharing them with us. Professor Gregory Treverton from the University of Southern California.